The porch light was always on, but no one had lived there for over 20 years. That was the first thing I noticed when I pulled up to my uncle's old house in Bridgemore. It was a quiet town, so quiet it made your own footsteps feel too loud. One gas station, one diner, a hardware store that closed at 6, and a main street that still had payphones. It felt like I had stepped 30 years back in time. I was 27, an auto mechanic by trade. When my uncle passed, he left me the house. I figured I'd fix it up, live cheap, maybe start fresh. That first week, I kept to myself, cleaned, worked on the garage, got used to the eerie silence. But I couldn't stop noticing that porch light across the street. It was always on, always, day and night, rain or shine. A faint amber glow under a cracked fixture, shining down onto a weathered wooden porch. The house behind it was 2 stories, pale blue paint peeling off like sunburnt skin. No curtains, no parked car, and no one ever seen going in or out. One evening, I mentioned it at the diner. I was sitting at the counter, eating a grilled cheese and nursing a lukewarm coffee, when I casually asked the waitress, "Hey, who lives in the place across from my place? Light sips always on." She paused just long enough for it to feel weird. Then she said, "You don't need to know about that place," and walked away. I didn't push it, but it stuck with me. At night, I'd sit on my front steps with a beer and stare at that light. I'd tell myself it was just someone who didn't want attention, maybe a shut-in, or someone old and stubborn. But the house looked dead. The grass was overgrown, paint chipping, mailbox rusted shut. I even walked by once during the day, windows caked in dust, like no one had touched them in years. Still, the porch light burned. Then I started noticing something else. Movement, subtle, like a flicker of shadow behind a curtainless window. I thought maybe it was a trick of the wind or reflections. But once, I was sure I saw a figure standing in the hallway. Not moving, just there, gone when I blinked. One night, around 2 a.m., I couldn't sleep. The air felt thick, the kind of stillness that makes your ears ring. I looked out my window. The porch light was off. That had never happened before. I got out of bed and just stood at the window, staring at the darkened house. I don't know how long I waited. Maybe 20 minutes, maybe longer. Then click, the light came back on. That fits when I decided I needed to get answers. The next day, I called the power company under the pretense of wanting to hook up a generator. While I had them on the line, I casually asked about the house across the street. The guy checked his system and said, "That address? We disconnected that line 15 years ago. No active meter." I hung up and stared at the house for a long time. That night, I walked across the street. The air around the house felt different, colder. The boards creaked under my boots as I stepped onto the porch. Up close, everything looked worse. Layers of dirt, paint bubbling off the siding, and that light overhead buzzing faintly. I knocked once. No sound. I tried the knob. It was stiff, corroded, barely moved. The mailbox was jammed shut. A pile of yellowed newspapers was wedged underneath the door. I stepped back, staring at the light above me. How was it on? Back at my house, I installed a small motion sensor above my front door. Nothing fancy, just a simple battery-powered one with an alert chime. I wanted to see if anything ever came from across the street. It went off the next night. At 3:12 a.m., I jumped up, rushed to the window. No one there, but the chime didn't lie. And the porch light across the street was flickering. For the first time, it didn't hold steady. It pulsed, dimmed, brightened, like it was reacting. I started checking the ground outside every morning. On the 4th day, I found muddy footprints. Small, barefoot, leading from the street to my porch, then back. That same night, my motion sensor lit up again, But when I checked the camera feed, it glitched. Static for 5 minutes straight. When it came back, nothing was there. I bought a better camera. Installed it myself. 1080p night vision. Hardwired to a flash drive. No cloud, no Wi-Fi to interfere. That night I left all the lights off and sat by the window watching through the blinds. At 2:57 a.m., the porch light across the street went out again. Then came the sound. Wood creaking. Slow, deliberate steps. My sensor light flicked on. I checked the monitor. There was someone standing on my porch. Not facing the camera. Facing the door. Close enough that their breath fogged the lens. They just stood there. 5 full minutes. Then, just as slowly, they turned. Walked across the street, up the opposite porch. And as they reached the door, click, the light turned back on. The next morning I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. The file was gone. Overwritten, not deleted. Replaced. A blank 2-minute clip with no timestamp. But the camera's red light was blinking. Recording again. I told myself I imagined it, that I hit the wrong setting, that the file had corrupted. But deep down I knew. Someone, something, was watching. That night, I nailed my windows shut. I added a second lock to the door. I sat on the couch with a flashlight in one hand and a crowbar in the other. I didn't sleep. I never saw the figure again. But the porch light? It's still on. And now, every few nights, I find a single footprint, just one, facing my door, waiting. Everyone in town said he was a regular, but no one knew his name, and no one remembered him leaving. It had been 10 years since I'd been back to Pine Hollow. 10 years since I packed up my little car after graduation and promised myself I wouldn't get stuck like so many others did. But time has a strange way of bending back on itself. Now I was 33, burnt out from teaching in the city, and for some reason I felt drawn back. The Harvest Festival was still the same. Hay bales stacked high around the town square. Kids running around with cider cups. Booths run by people who'd known me since I was in diapers. My parents were thrilled I'd come home for it, even if just for a weekend. But something felt tighter, smaller, like the town had pulled in on itself. On the first afternoon I noticed him. A man, maybe mid-40s. Gray flannel shirt, jeans, worn brown boots, completely average, but somehow off. His posture was too straight, his face too blank. He wasn't smiling, not talking, just standing near the caramel apple booth, watching the crowd. At first I brushed it off. Small towns attract all kinds. But then I saw him again, near the hayride line, and again at the corn maze, and then again, just outside the restroom trailer, leaning against a tree. Always in the background, always watching, never interacting. I asked the woman running the kettle corn booth, "Hey, who sits that guy? Gray shirt?" She looked up without even needing to search. "Oh, that sits just Jonah. He sits always here." "Jonah?" "Yeah. Kinda quiet, but harmless. He never misses the festival." "Where does he live?" She blinked. Somewhere around, I guess." That was the thing. No one could really say. I asked a few more people over the next day or two. "Oh, Jonah. He sips just a local." "Oh, he sips always at the festival." "Oh, he sips harmless." But no last name. No job, no car, no house. On the third night, I couldn't sleep. Something about that man kept circling in my head. Around midnight, I slipped out of my parents' house and walked downtown. The booths were shuttered, the music silenced. Just the hum of distant crickets and the occasional gust rattling old banners. That Seps when I saw him. Standing at the far end of the square, near the church, just standing facing away. I called out, "Hey," but he didn't move. I started walking toward him, but as I did he turned and walked slowly behind the church and out of sight. I jogged after him, turning the corner within seconds. But he was gone. Behind the church was just a chain-link fence and a row of garbage bins. No gate, no path, no sound. It bothered me. The next morning, I asked one of the women from the festival committee, Mrs. Dorsey, a retired librarian who used to read to my class. "Do you know anything about Jonah?" I asked. Her expression changed, tightened. "Some people just linger," she said. "Not everyone moves on when they supposed to." That phrase stuck with me all day. Linger. That afternoon, I dug through the attic at my parents' house. Old scrapbooks, yearbooks, boxes of photos my mom never got around to sorting. In one labeled Harvest Fest '94, I found a photo of me as a kid, grinning face, painted like a tiger. And in the background, far back, near the popcorn booth, was a man in a gray flannel shirt. I kept looking. Festival 2001. There he was again, in a different spot, still alone. Fall Carnival 2010. Again. Same face, same clothes. Not older, not younger. No one else noticed, but he was always there. By the final night of the festival, I was convinced something was wrong. I watched him from a distance, standing near the bonfire. People moved around him, past him, like he wasn't there, like he was part of the scenery. At one point, he looked directly at me and smiled. Later that evening, I found him behind the town hall, near the cornfield where they parked overflow cars. It was quiet back there. Just us, the sounds of the festival muted by distance. I stood a few feet from him and asked, "Why are you always here?" He tilted his head slightly. His eyes were dull, not dead, just hollow. "Because someone has to stay," he said, voice low, steady, final. Then he turned and walked into the cornfield. I followed, but I didn't get far. The rows were neat and flat and muddy, and there were no footprints. Nothing to follow. He had disappeared. Just like that. The next morning, I packed up to leave. I didn't tell anyone what happened. I didn't want to sound insane. I told myself it was just a weird local guy, that the festival committee was playing into some small town folklore. But a year later, I came back. Not because I planned to, but because I felt like I needed to. And everything was the same. Same booths, same music, same decorations, but something had shifted. People recognized me, more than before. "It's good to have you back, Clara," the woman at the cider stand said, like I'd never left. "It wouldn't be the festival without you," said someone else. And then I saw the photo. Near the center of the square, a display board of memories, harvest festivals through the years. A printed collage of past decades, old smiles frozen in time. In the photo from this year, I was there, but not in the front, not posing. In the background, off to the side, watching, just watching. No matter how far we drove, we always ended up back in front of the same gas station. It started as one of those spontaneous weekend getaways. Just me and Jason, my boyfriend of 5 years, crammed into his old Jeep with a couple of duffel bags and a thermos of coffee. We wanted to get out of the city, breathe some fresh air, find weird little antique shops or quiet diners off the highway. Something different. We were somewhere in rural Tennessee when we found the detour. Jason had read about it on some travel blog, a scenic drive that cut through rolling hills, dotted with abandoned barns and fading small towns. It sounded perfect. The sun was starting to dip when we pulled off the main highway. The road narrowed almost immediately, lined with sagging power lines and shoulder-high weeds. There were no other cars, just us and the landscape. About 15 minutes in, we saw the gas station. It looked like it hadn't been updated since the 60s. A squat, boxy building with a faded red overhang, one rusted-out pump, and a flickering open sign in the window. We were low on drinks, so we decided to stop. The place smelled like motor oil and dust. Inside, the shelves were sparse. A few dusty bags of chips, sun-faded postcards, and off-brand soda in a cooler that hummed too loudly. The clerk didn't say much. Middle-aged, sun-leathered skin, blank stare. He rang us up in silence, never really making eye contact. As we left, I noticed a handwritten sign taped to the inside of the glass door. "You leave the same way you came." I pointed it out to Jason, with a raised eyebrow. He laughed and said, "Small town folks, probably some weird inside joke." We got back on the road. At first, it was beautiful. Wide fields on either side, silos catching the golden light, cows grazing in the distance. But after about 30 minutes, something started to feel off. Jason was the first to say it. "Didn't we pass that barn already?" I looked up. A crumbling red-roofed structure with a tree growing through one side. I stepped, taken a photo of it earlier. Yeah, we definitely did. Maybe we stad taken a wrong turn. The GPS had frozen a while back, spinning in place. No signal. We didn't think much of it until we passed a bent speed limit sign, the exact same one from before, then a billboard advertising some defunct amusement park. Cedar Thrill, reopening 1998. Fold at sits when Jason slowed the car. "I think we set your driving in circles. Let's just turn around," I said. "Head back to the highway." So we did. Another 30 minutes of driving, different turns, dead ends, side roads that looked promising, and then we saw it again. The gas station. But something was off. The pump was gone. The open sign was darker now, and the clerk was different. Younger, pale, wearing the same uniform, but with slick back hair and a different expression. This one didn't even acknowledge us as we slowed in front. Jason stopped the car. We stared at it in silence. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. We didn't go inside. We just drove. Any direction that felt unfamiliar. We took it, but it didn't matter. We kept ending up back there. Same station, same sign, same creeping dread. At one point, Jason pulled over and got out, pacing beside the car. Their stit's gotta be a trick. A turn we missed, some loop in the road, but there was no loop on any map. No signal. The Jeep's compass spun lazily, then froze in the wrong direction. Then I started hearing it. Faint music, like a radio stuck between stations. A soft country tune, distant and warped. Even when the car stereo was off, Jason didn't hear it, or he pretended not to. That night, we parked behind the gas station. There was nowhere else to go, and we were exhausted. I barely slept, listening to every sound outside, the occasional creak, a breeze moving through weeds. That music again, closer now. At sunrise, the light filtering through the windshield finally calmed me. For a moment, I felt like maybe it was over. Maybe the road would make sense again in daylight. I reached over to wake Jason, but the passenger seat was empty. At first, I thought he'd gone to use the restroom. I got out, walked around the building. Nothing. I called his name. Again and again. I checked the store. Locked. I looked for footprints. The dirt around the car was untouched. It was like he said vanished. Panic set in. I called out louder, screamed his name. I ran into the road, into the fields. Nothing. The world was silent. I collapsed onto the gas station's front steps, sobbing. When I finally looked up, the sign on the door had changed. The old paper was gone. A new note, same handwriting, taped neatly to the glass. "Only one leaves." I ran to the car, fumbling with the keys. I didn't even know where I was going. I just drove. And drove. But the trees all looked the same. And eventually, I saw the gas station again. Except this time, there was no clerk. No signs. Just the building, waiting. Now I sleep in the back seat most nights. I stop trying to drive away. The road always curves back. Sometimes I hear Jason's voice. Distant, calling my name from the woods behind the station. Sometimes I answer, and sometimes I don't sit.